Good day, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the voice of reason. Well, welcome to the program today. We are continuing our ongoing coverage of global conflicts, and specifically the largest global conflict that has occurred since essentially World War II. That is the war between the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, its Ukrainian proxies, and the armed forces of the Russian Federation and its allied forces. Now, the war continues. The big question right now that has to be asked is the Ukrainian military going to survive the winter? Yes, the winter. The Russians have been pounding Ukrainian infrastructure sites over the course of the last year. The Russian military continues to use massive amounts of heavy artillery, long-range multiple launch rocket systems, guided glide bombs against Ukrainian forces all along the front line. And right now, we are starting to see the Ukrainian military start to crumble. How do we know this? Because of anecdotal reports from the frontline Ukrainian troops. Over the past year, and this year is not over with yet, we have seen more than 60,000 Ukrainian troops flee their posts, flee the military, and attempt to leave the Ukraine for Western Europe. 60,000. That kind of number is incredibly high for a military that is facing serious manpower shortages. So why is this happening? Why are 60,000, essentially 6 divisions worth of Ukrainian troops throwing down their rifle and fleeing the battlefield? Well, the answer is simple. The war is incredibly harsh. Compounding that, the decision-making processes in terms of how long an individual Ukrainian can serve in the military is indefinite. If you are drafted, conscripted into the Ukrainian military, you do not have a exit the service date. You do not know when you will be discharged. It could be when you are wounded or killed. It could be 3 years, 4 years from the date you enter. The Ukrainian soldiers' ability to take leave, 20 days a year. You can take one block of 10 days followed by another block of 10 days. Just to compare and contrast, the U.S. military gives you about 30 days. Now, what we understand is most Ukrainian soldiers do not see that 10 days of block leave. Most are, again, stuck on the front lines, being wore down day after day by the Russian military. So an incredibly difficult situation for the average Ukrainian conscript. I mean, look, we can go and look at video footage coming out of Kiev where military commissars, military personnel, security forces personnel, police are going into nightclubs and arresting Ukrainian men for not showing up for military service. Now, what's interesting is most of these Ukrainians, these 60,000 Ukrainian troops that have vacated their positions, are willing to go to jail, to prison, rather than serving in the Ukrainian military. A recent survey was done, and most, like something like 9 out of 10 of the Ukrainian soldiers that have gone AWOL have said, yes, I would rather do 5 to 10 years in prison than be sent to the front line. Well, why? Why would that be? Well, it's simple. The average Ukrainian conscript believes that they are going to be killed if they go to the front line. Casualty rates are incredibly high. Incredibly high. Compounding that, let's say you have a 5-year prison sentence for AWOL. Well, in all likelihood, under the current guidelines of the suspended Constitution, the beacon of democracy, the Ukraine, you could end up serving 5 years in military service. 5 years in military service. You do not have an end date. They do not give these Ukrainian soldiers that are inducted into military service an end date. So why is that happening? Why are they not allowing Ukrainian troops to have, okay, this is when you start and this is when you leave? You have a 2-year contract. You're going to start and you're going to end here. Well, the answer to that is because they don't have enough personnel. And when you don't have enough personnel, you start a stop-loss process. The United States did it. The United States did it during the Iraq War. And that essentially says that, okay, you have a exit the service date of December 20th of this year. Well, because of the needs of the military, because of the needs of the nation, we are stopping that. We are not going to allow you to exit the military. We're going to push that up to 6 months to 1 year. But that's not what even the Ukrainians are doing. The Ukrainians, once the Ukrainian military has you, it doesn't let you go. You become a permanent fixture of the Ukrainian state. And those that don't want to go through this process, they leave the country. Good old Davidov, the content provider on YouTube. Case in point. He was probably pretty smart if you think about it, right? Early in the war, he declares apparently, oh, they won't take me because I don't have any military skill set, and he's a pilot, right? Okay, and then he says he has health problems and whatever, right? I guarantee you they would take Davidov right now. They would take Davidov in a heartbeat. But you know what? Davidov is hanging out eating cheese in Switzerland or Germany or wherever the hell he's at right now. Haven't watched his content in a while, but it's incredibly interesting to see that he is a Ukrainian fanboy, and and he's wanted by the Ukrainian government for not serving his country. Yet he profits off of talking about the conflict. Anyway, I'm not going to get too much into that, but that's just the way it is. But the war continues. We are continuing to see Russian forces make headway. We have just recently, within the last 24 hours, have seen Russian forces. Let's go over to Chasiv Yar. Let's go over to the other map here. And if you look here, this is a little bit updated, better than the previous deep state. So you see this canal that's just kind of like that runs to the east of Chasiv Yar. This was a major defensive barrier for the Ukrainians. The Russians have broke through in this area, and as we speak, Russian paratroops are now conducting house clearing operations and street-to-street fighting in Chasiv Yar. It's highly probable that Russian airborne units have already entered the downtown industrial built-up area of Chasiv Yar as we speak. I'm talking about Spetsnaz and reconnaissance elements of the Russian military. They move up, they set up their their sixes, which is their sniper strategy, and then they start clearing operations of these Ukrainian forces with the support of its air force and heavy artillery. But as we speak, Chasiv Yar is in the process of being enveloped and cleared by Russian forces. To the south, we continue to see in Kursk vicious urbanized combat taking place between Russian and Ukrainian forces. Again, very, very vicious conflict, incredibly high levels of intense combat taking place. And that is what is causing, by and large, these Ukrainians now to say, okay, we're done. There's no end to this. And quite frankly, I think deep down, the average Ukrainian soldier knows that eventually the end is going to come, that they're not going to be able to win this. And again, if you go back and you look at history, look at World War II, look at these conflicts, look at the Winter War, right? The Ukrainians can slow the inevitable, but the inevitable is still going to happen. The Russians are just not going to allow the Ukraine to become part of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. And right now, what's interesting is Volodymyr Zelensky is now talking about the development of nuclear weapons if he is not allowed into the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Now, it's a double-edged sword. Look, as soon as Ukraine is accepted into NATO, and as we speak, there are large-scale NATO operations taking place in the North Sea. Multiple aircraft carriers from the United States, the United Kingdom. This large fleet is operating in the North Sea, preparing for the eventual global war that is coming, that is on the way. But it's a tough situation. NATO or nuclear weapons. What do you do? What will the Russians do when the Ukrainians finally figure out that they're not joining NATO and the Ukrainian state declares that it seeks a nuclear weapon? What do you think the Russians are going to do? Think the Russians are going to allow the Ukraine to have nuclear weapons? Probably not. Most definitely not. I think at this point, the whole concept of a independent Ukrainian state is slowly being removed from the table. As the conflict continues and expands, I think the leadership in the Kremlin is coming to the conclusion that there's going to be no other choice but to dismantle the Ukrainian state and just take complete control over it. Now, will that happen? Will we see ultimately the collapse of the Ukrainian military that would lead to that situation where Russian troops are eventually rolling into Kiev? Quite possibly. I have to wonder if the Ukrainian military survives the winter. The information that we have right now, again, things are incredibly dire for the Ukrainian military. Incredibly dire. As we speak, the Kursk salient of the Kursk incursion is collapsing. Let's go over to the deep state map again, where we can kind of see what has happened over the last few days. So going back essentially to the beginning of October, right? Remember when the Ukrainians were talking about they had surrounded a Russian unit in this area here? Well, here we go. And here we are. Yeah, this whole area was retaken by the Russians. So again, as I watch this, as I try to wrap my head around this operation in Kursk, I really don't understand it. I don't know how it benefits the Ukrainian military. I don't know how it benefits the war strategy. I get that the the Ukrainian state believes that they are diverting troops from other areas of the conflict, and maybe they are. Maybe some Russian troops are moving and fighting in Kursk, which we know they are. But is it really having an impact on the course of the conflict in other areas? And when I mean the course of the conflict, the overall strategy of the Russian military. Look, the overall strategy of the Russian military right now is not to take control of large areas of territory. We're not seeing that. We saw that at the beginning of the war. But what we're seeing right now is a concerted effort to essentially destroy and break the will of the Ukrainian military apparatus. And then once that happens, and it's going to happen. It's going to happen unless Kamala Harris is elected, or I don't want to say elected president, because I don't believe she will be elected. I believe she will be placed in that position in democracy here in the United States as we know it, in terms of our constitutional republic, that will have come to the end. And to restore that, that will take other means. But don't want to get too much into that subject, but we do anticipate that if Kamala Harris is placed into the figurehead position as, quote-unquote, the dear leader, the probability of direct NATO intervention inside of the Ukraine goes up incredibly high. And then we know what happens after that, right? But again, as we speak, the Russian strategy continues day by day. The breaking of the Ukrainian military continues. We will continue to report. We will continue to watch what is happening very closely. We're also watching other events as well. Things could become very uncomfortable around the world in the next 30 days. Let's watch. We will report. Again, thank you for joining us. More to come very soon. As always, have a good day.